Good evening, and thank you for being here this evening. I didn't think Jason was going to make it, but he did. They left at, before 9 o'clock this morning, 8:30 or so this morning. They're going to go see the Bible Museum and the Ark. I think it's the real Ark. I think that's where it landed. And so they're going to go see it. Let all those animals loose and get them out of there. But it's a good adventure. Jason didn't get finished last time, so we're going to have to finish for him. And he got down to about verse 22 of chapter 12. And it begins, "And he said to his disciples, For this reason I say to you, do not be anxious for your life as to what you shall eat, nor for your body as to what you shall put on. For life is more than food, and the body than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, and they have no storeroom nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more valuable you are than the birds. And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single cubit to his lifespan? If then you cannot do even a very little thing, why are you anxious about other matters? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. But I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory did not clothe himself like one of these. But if God so arrays the grass in the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more will he clothe you, O men of little faith? And do not seek what you shall eat and what you shall drink, and do not keep worrying. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek, but your Father knows that you need these things. But seek for his kingdom, and these things shall be added to you. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom." That verse starts out with Jesus saying, "For this reason." So what does that mean? It has something to do with what he's been talking about, because he says, "For this reason." And look back and see what he's been dealing with. He's trying to teach these people a spiritual lesson, and there's somebody back in the group going, wait a minute. Tell my brother to share my inheritance with me. Anybody who's taught school has seen that happen, where you're trying to teach something, and some kids back there going, I got a new puppy yesterday. And they're not learning a thing that you're saying because they got a new puppy yesterday. And this man wanted Jesus to tell his brother to share his inheritance with him. And so Jesus tells the story of the farmer. And his point is that we need to not worry about earthly things, that's not what is important. That man was only concerned about one thing. He was worried about getting his part of the inheritance. And can you imagine sitting at the feet of Jesus and being offered the kind of spiritual feast that Jesus had to offer, and all you could think about was money? You know, what would you give for the chance today to actually sit down literally at the feet of Jesus and hear him teach? What's that? Yeah. Yeah, the apostles were the same a lot of times. They were thinking about a physical kingdom and who's going to get to sit at your right hand, who's going to sit at your left hand. And so they also had trouble until it was over, until he'd been raised from the dead. As we say many times, we're fortunate to have the whole story, and we can look back at it. They were looking from another direction. But I just don't know what we would give to have the opportunity to sit at Jesus' feet and literally hear him tell us, share God's word with us, and tell us about the kingdom. And so Jesus is saying, don't worry about physical things, about material things. And he points to the ravens, the birds. And they don't punch a time clock. They don't go in at 8 o'clock, 8 to 5. But God takes care of them. And so don't worry about the little things. Don't even worry about the big things. Don't worry about any of these things. And then he points to the flowers, the lilies of the field. They don't work. They don't go to the office. But God takes care of them. And the contrast is, if God takes such good care of things to us that might be insignificant, birds and flowers and things like that, as much as we enjoy them, in the bigger scheme of things, they're not as important as other things in our lives. But if God takes such good care of them, what do you think he's going to do for you? And so his admonition is put the kingdom first. Now, he doesn't say that you shouldn't be responsible. You know, Paul says that if someone doesn't work, neither let him eat. And so Jesus is not saying quit your job and just sit around and do nothing. He expects us to do that, but as we do that, we put the kingdom first and everything else falls into place. And so we're driven not by any of our daily concerns, but we're driven by the kingdom. And we put that first, then everything else will fall into place. In verses 33 and 34, he goes a little bit farther, and he says, sell your possessions and give to charity. Make yourselves purses which do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near, nor moth destroys. For your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Not that this is a bad idea, but I think Jesus often speaks in hyperbole. When he talks about if your eye offends you to pluck it out, I think he's doing a hyperbole where he's exaggerating to make a point. And I think here too, that our attitude should be that our possessions are nothing. As I say, it's not a bad thing to sell your possessions and give to charity, but it's a greater point that he's making. He's trying to make the point of getting your priorities straight. And if we take care of that, then everything else is going to be okay. Our heart is going to be where our treasure is. You remember Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, you cannot serve God and riches. You cannot serve God and mammon. And so if we are trying to serve physical things, there's no room for God in that equation. And so wherever our treasure is, that's where our heart will be. And so Jesus is telling them, don't be stingy, and to store up heavenly treasure where it really matters. And as we often say, 100 years from now, what's going to make any difference? The only things that are going to make any difference 100 years from now are spiritual things. There are things that have to do with our relationship with God and the kingdom and Jesus, and those are going to matter 100 years from now. And all these things that we spend our time and energy on, all of the financial worries, all of the other worries that we have 100 years from now aren't going to make a bit of difference. They will be so insignificant that we won't even remember them happening. And then in verses 35 through 40, Jesus changes direction a little bit, but not entirely. But the admonition here for a little while is to be ready when he comes back. And that's partially related to getting our priorities straight, because if we don't have our priorities straight, we're not going to be ready when he comes back. He says, be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps alight, and be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door to him when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master shall find on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will gird himself to serve, and have them recline at the table, and will come up and wait on them. Whether he comes in the second watch or even in the third, and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. And be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have allowed his house to be broken into. You too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. This first watch, second watch, third watch are kind of like first shift, second shift, third shift. And second and third watch are going to get into the evening and early morning hours. And what he's saying is it doesn't matter what time of day that the master comes, the servants need to be ready for his return. He also makes the point that if the house owner knew when the thief was coming, he'd prepare. Thieves come when you don't expect it. And that's the way Jesus has come, like a thief in the night. And so we need to always be ready. And he's not comparing himself to a thief as someone who's going to come steal something. He's just saying that we need to be ready when he comes back, because we don't know when he's coming. And the blessing is on the ones that the master finds ready. And he's going to elaborate on that in just a minute. And the master will serve those who recline at the table. The watchman prepares for the thief, and Jesus is going to come back when we don't expect him. And all the attempts to foretell the second coming of Jesus are doomed, because Jesus said he himself didn't know. Only the Father knows when he's coming back. And so if we look at any passage in the Bible and think, okay, this is telling me the clues of when Jesus is coming back, we miss the point. And Jesus said, you're not going to know when I'm coming back. Why is that? It's for this reason right here. We have to be ready. If Jesus said that I'm going to come back on August the 10th, 2021, what would people do? Up until that day, they'd probably be doing just whatever they wanted to. I would hope a lot of people would be of good character enough that they wouldn't, that they'd be doing the right thing the whole time. But you know what a lot of people would be doing? And then right before the deadline, all of a sudden they're wonderful Christian people. Look at how they'd be glad to give away all of their possessions. They would sell their house and quit their jobs and give everything to the poor about 3 minutes before Jesus came. Right, and the bottom line is if they're not faithful in a little, they're not going to be faithful in a lot. And Jesus doesn't want those people for his followers, people who would do that. He wants people who are going to always be ready, regardless of when he's going to come, and it doesn't matter when he comes because you're ready whenever that happens. In the next 7 verses, from verses 41 through 48, Peter asks a very normal question. And Peter's question is, are you talking to me? Lord, are you addressing this parable to us or to everyone else as well? And the Lord said, who then is the faithful and sensible steward, whom his master will put in charge of his servants, to give them their rations at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time in coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. And that slave who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accord with his will shall receive many lashes. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive but a few. And from everyone who has been given much shall be required, and to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. Peter asks, is this for us or is it for everybody? And I think we often wonder that, don't we, when we run across a passage in the Bible, does this really apply to me? Or is it for somebody else? And so Jesus tells this story about the faithful and sensible steward, and he's the one that's going to be blessed, the one that's ready regardless. He is always prepared for the master's return. Now, there will be a slave who's unprepared for his master's return. He may be busy beating his fellow slaves because the master's not coming around for a long time, and so I'll just go ahead and do whatever I want to. Peter talks in 2 Peter chapter 3 about the return of Jesus. And the skeptics are saying, where is his return? You know, ever since the fathers died, everything's gone on the same. Nothing's happening. Jesus isn't coming back. So what's the point? And so Peter says, but do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient towards you, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, on account of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, and the elements will melt with intense heat? But according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, since you look for these things, be diligent to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless, and regard the patience of our Lord to be salvation, just as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given him, wrote to you, as also in all his letters, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to understand, which the untaught and unstable distort, as they do also the rest of the Scriptures to their own destruction. You therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand, be on your guard, lest being carried away by the error of unprincipled men, you fall from your own steadfastness, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be the glory both now and to the day of eternity. Amen. Why did Jesus not come back yesterday? God wants to give people a chance to repent. And if he hasn't come back so far today, it's because he wants to give people a chance to repent. People accuse God of wanting to destroy people. But God does not want to destroy anybody. God sent his Son to be sacrificed so that wouldn't happen. I don't know what else he could have done. He paid the maximum price. And the only reason that he hasn't sent Jesus back is to give people a chance to repent. That's not going to go on forever. There will be a day when God says enough is enough. This is it. It's over. I've given everybody as much a chance as they're going to get, and that's the end. You know, there are a lot of discussions about this earth and what kind of earth it's going to be, but it's pretty clear that this physical earth is going to be destroyed. If you burn up the elements, you destroy the elements, there's not much left. It's not a purified earth if all of the elements are gone. It's no earth at all. Teresa? I didn't wear my hearing aids. Oh, the new heavens and new earth. That's a good question, and Corey's going to answer that for us. The new heaven and new earth is not this present one, and it's what we saw in the book of Revelation. It is a spiritual place. It's not a physical place. Our bodies will not be physical bodies. They will be spiritual bodies, and Paul explains that. And he says people who are looking for physical bodies, Paul uses pretty strong language. He said, "You fool." It's not going to be the same kind of body. And so our spiritual bodies are not going to need to dwell in a physical place. What that looks like, I have no idea. And John, in his letter, said that we don't know what we will be like. We just know that we will be like him. No, nobody's come back to report it to us of I went there and this is what it looked like. It's a spiritual place. And so it's a new heaven and a new earth. It's not this one purified. It's a new one. And it's a whole lot better than this one. We can't imagine how good it is. In James chapter 4 and verse 17, he simply says, "To the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." Right before that, he said that people say, we're going to do this and that and make a profit, go into this town and make a profit. And he says, you don't know what your life is like. You're just a vapor. And he says the right thing to do is to know what's right and do it all the time. And it's just another example of being ready. And we need to do what's right because that's what Jesus wants us to do. And that's because it's the right thing. But this is where we get the idea. We have sins of commission and sins of omission. And a sin of commission is when we do something that's wrong, something that's against God's word, against his will. This is a sin of omission. It's not just a sin to do something wrong. It's a sin to not do something right. And he says if you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, it's sin. And so it's up to us to know what that is. What's he talking about here? What should we be doing? And we need to find out what that is and do it. Jesus goes on in verses 49 through 53. "I've come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on earth? I tell you, no, but rather division. For from now on 5 members in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law." I don't think we can truly appreciate the agony that Jesus went through. The agony that he went through in the garden when he was praying that if there's any other way to let that cup pass. In Jesus' prayer for unity in John 17, why did he need to pray those things? Because he was afraid that it wouldn't happen. He asked God to preserve them in unity. And he knew there was a danger that wouldn't happen. I cannot imagine the agony that Jesus had, knowing the things that he knew and knowing what was going to happen. I can't imagine the agony that Paul had when he called the elders from Ephesus to Miletus and said, "From among your own selves wolves will arise." He wasn't guessing. He was stating a fact. He knew that was going to happen. And Jesus knows that his followers are going to suffer, and that families are going to be divided, and that friends are going to be divided. And he says it's time to choose sides. And it gets right back to the way where we started with get your priorities right. Are you going to make material things, worldly things your priority, or are you going to make spiritual things your priority? There's no compromise. Remember, there are only two paths. There aren't three paths. There's not a narrow one to the left and a narrow one to the right and a great big one in the middle. The one to the right is narrow, and the one to the left is really wide, and those are the two choices. And so we need to take sides, and there's no compromise. And when it comes to Jesus, we can't be straddling the fence and be kind of Christians almost sometimes. And then verses 54 to 59. And he was also saying to the multitudes, "When you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately say, 'A shower is coming,' and so it turns out. And when you see a south wind blowing, you say, 'It will be a hot day,' and it turns out that way. You hypocrites, you know how to analyze the appearance of the earth and the sky, but why do you not analyze this present time? And why do you not even on your own initiative judge what is right? For while you are going with your opponent to appear before the magistrate, on your way there, make an effort to settle with him, in order that he may not drag you before the judge, and the judge turn you over to the constable, and the constable throw you into prison. I say to you, you shall not get out of there until you have paid the very last cent." He says, you know how to judge the weather. You see a cloud coming up, you think you know it's going to rain, and you can gauge what's going to happen with the weather. So why can't you see the evidence of spiritual things? You're good at picking out those physical things, but why can't you see what evidence is in front of your face? Jesus has been telling them all along who he is. He has been telling them what's going to happen, that he's going to die and going to be raised the third day, and they just don't seem to see it. And his question is, why would you keep going down the wrong road if there's a way to get on the right road? Now, I know that guys who make a wrong turn and head the wrong way down the interstate don't want to turn around and head back the other way. But we need to, because if we're turned around going the wrong way, we need to turn around and go the right way without being stubborn about it or making excuses. And too often in life, don't we make excuses about why we're headed the wrong way and give reasons? That won't work. And we need to get on the right path and end up in the right place. Which brings us to chapter 13. It begins with a discussion about who are the greater sinners. The first 5 verses of chapter 13. Now on the same occasion there were some present who reported to him about the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And he answered and said to them, "Do you suppose that these Galileans were greater sinners than all other Galileans, because they suffered this fate? I tell you, no, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Or do you suppose that those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them were worse culprits than all the men who live in Jerusalem? I tell you, no, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish." It doesn't tell us why this statement was made. Why would people bring this up to him? And it doesn't tell us why. It may be another occasion when people are trying to trap Jesus. How many times do they think that they're going to trap Jesus? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And they expect him to say, no, it's not lawful, and then he'd be guilty of insurrection. Or say, yes, it's lawful, and have all the Jews mad at him because they hate the tax. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He said, show me a coin whose picture's on it, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and things that are God, the things that are God's. They may wanted to compare others as being greater sinners, and that's one of the possibilities. But there's some reason why they brought this specific thing up. And it may be that they're wanting Jesus to choose side on this, because Galileans were traditionally insurrectionists, always struggling against the Roman government. If he said they were greater sinners, then he would lose his Jewish audience. If he said, no, they're not, he might lose with the Roman government. It's one of those lose-lose situations that they were throwing him in. And we don't know what reason, because it doesn't tell us. But we know what Jesus did with it. He doesn't always play along with what they want. He uses the door they open to make a better point. And his point is, do you really think that they are greater sinners than anybody else? In other words, they're bigger sinners than you are. You're just little sinners. They're big sinners. And so you're going to be okay because they're bigger sinners. He said, nope. Unless you repent, you're going to suffer the same fate. Not physically, but spiritually. And then he just volunteers, and he says, by the way, the 18 on whom the Tower of Siloam fell, are they worse culprits than anybody else? No, unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish. We don't have a direct historical record of these two events. Pilate was known for setting up situations where he could kill people because he didn't like the Galileans, and he was trying to trap them. And it may be that the Galileans are an example of a Pilate treating people who are against him. The Tower in Siloam may have to do with an aqueduct that people were helping him build. In that case, it's people who are helping Pilate. And so people who are working against Pilate, people who are helping Pilate, they suffer a tragedy. There's no difference. And there's no difference between them and us, and them and the ones who are listening, because unless we repent, we'll all end up with the same fate, spiritually, not physically. And that's his point. So Jesus takes whatever opportunity, whatever reason that was presented to him, he uses it to make a much greater spiritual point. Then he tells a parable in verses 6 through 9 about a fig tree. And he began telling this parable. A certain man had a fig tree which had been planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it, and did not find any. But he said to the vineyard keeper, behold, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree without finding any. Cut it down. Why does it even use up the ground? And he answered and said to him, let it alone, sir, for this year too, until I dig around it and put in fertilizer. And if it bears fruit next year, fine. But if not, cut it down. Here's a fig tree that has not borne any fruit for 3 years. And I would imagine that's after it's supposed to bear fruit. It's not a freshly planted tree. It's a tree that's been there maturely and should have been bearing fruit for 3 years. Otherwise, it's not reasonable to expect it to have fruit on it. And so the owner of the land says, cut it down. It's just occupying land, and it's not producing anything. And so why does it even use up the ground? What would be the spiritual application there? If there are people who claim to be God's followers, but they're really not doing anything, and the master says, why are they taking up space? Why are they breathing the air? They're not producing anything. They're just there. But the one that's in charge of taking care of it says, let it alone, sir, for 1 more year while I dig around it and fertilize it. And I guess if we have to assign names to these, that God would be the landowner and that Jesus would be the vine keeper. And it's not intended to present God in a bad light or pit God against Jesus. It's just Jesus saying, let's give him another chance with some help and some additional aid. Now, it's not for an unlimited time. And if it does not bear fruit this next year, then it's a goner. Jesus is patient toward us. God is patient. We've seen not wanting anybody to perish, but everybody to come to repentance. Teresa? Yeah, you do the deeds in keeping with righteousness. If we claim to be righteous, then we're going to have to keep the deeds that fit with righteousness. And we need to bear fruit. And if it bears fruit, fine. But if it doesn't, get it out of the way. Cut it down. We need to all make sure that we're bearing fruit and not just taking up space. It is a little bit detrimental to the kingdom when people are doing nothing and people outside the church see them doing nothing and they're not acting in a Christian way. It's not productive for the kingdom to see people not being Christians. This is just a lesson about Jesus' patience and God's patience too. It's not never ending, but that's what they want to have happen. Give us a little bit more fertilizer, water it, and dig around it, get rid of the weeds. And if we need to do this spiritually, we need to get the weeds out of our life. And what is the fertilizer part? The Word. You have it in your hand. You have the fertilizer in your hand right now. I didn't really believe it about how big a deal Miracle-Gro is. I started using Miracle-Gro a little bit more this year. You'd be amazed at how well that stuff works. It's just, you fertilize it right and it grows. And I just thought, oh well, I'll just water it every month or two and it'll be okay. But I have learned the value of fertilizer and water, and plants thrive. And in fact, for another object lesson, the hail shredded our tomato plants. There was nothing left but just a stalk. And I had 4 tomato plants planted, and I didn't want to dig them up, but I got 2 more and put in between them. I now have a tomato forest. Those plants are like 5.5 feet tall. They're going on 6 feet tall, and they're just thick. One lesson is that it took a little bit of a pruning for the roots to grow. And sometimes that's in our life, it takes a little bit of pruning. And I think that allowed the roots just to go crazy. And then when they came back and I started putting fertilizer and water on them, they just went wild. And the same thing's true of a Christian. Sometimes if we allow ourselves to be disciplined a little bit and allow the roots to grow a little bit, and we are faithful about fertilizer and faithful about watering, we just might turn into a forest of tomatoes. I don't know. But I think Jesus obviously has a very good object lesson here. There's a story here about a woman who is healed on the Sabbath day. And Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman who for 18 years had a sickness caused by a spirit, and she was bent double and could not straighten up at all. And when Jesus saw her, he called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your sickness." And he laid his hands upon her, and immediately she was made erect again and began glorifying God. Jesus was teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath, which was not an uncommon thing. We see Paul going into the Sabbath, or in the synagogue on the Sabbath to teach when he was traveling. They were open to people coming in and speaking and hearing what they had to say. There was this woman who had been bent double for 18 years. Doesn't it hurt you to see someone who is stooped over and in that kind of pain and they can't straighten up? And she had been that way for 18 years. And Jesus said, "You're freed from your sickness." And he healed her. He touched her, and she stood straight up. Another one of those miracles, like all those others, where there's no physical therapy involved. Jason was talking Sunday about a man who'd been lame from birth. There is no way he could walk, much less leap, because he didn't have any muscles to atrophy. He had never learned how to walk. And when Jesus healed him, he was healed and he was jumping around, leaping. When Jesus heals a man with a withered hand, that's a big noticeable change, that it straightened up right then and it was fully functional. And here's a woman who is bent double for 18 years, and Jesus heals her, and she stands right straight up. Everybody's going to be happy, right? There is the synagogue official, and he is indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he began saying to the multitude in response, "There are 6 days in which work should be done. Therefore come during them and get healed, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead him away to water him? And this woman, a daughter of Abraham as she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, should she not have been released from this bond on the Sabbath day?" And as he said this, all his opponents were being humiliated, and the entire multitude was rejoicing over all the glorious things being done by him. This synagogue official is just really upset because Jesus healed this woman on the Sabbath. And I don't know what he expected from Jesus. Maybe he expected Jesus to support him and say, yeah, you shouldn't do this. But it's interesting that he speaks to the multitude, not to Jesus. He doesn't say to Jesus, don't heal anybody on the Sabbath. He tells the multitude, you don't come to be healed on the Sabbath. You have 6 days, come in some other day, but don't come in on the Sabbath day. And whatever he was expecting, this was not it, because Jesus said, you hypocrites. And that word that's translated hypocrites means an actor under an assumed character, like on stage. And so if you can imagine someone on stage playing someone who they are not, then that's what Jesus calls this person. You hypocrites. You're pretending to be a godly person. You're pretending to be a leader in the synagogue, and you're putting on a false mask. You're putting on a show, and that is not who you are, because I know that if you have an animal in the stall on the Sabbath day and it needs to go out to be taken care of, water or whatever, you're going to let it out. And now compare your ox or your donkey to this woman, and she is a daughter of Abraham. Now, how many times do they refer to themselves as sons of Abraham? It's a big deal. You know, they're special because we're sons of Abraham. And Jesus says, well, here's a woman a daughter of Abraham, and Satan has bound her for 18 long years. You know, Satan seemed to have more of a physical presence during the ministry of Jesus. If God was going to be present here on earth in a physical sense, then maybe Satan got a little bit of leeway. That may be what he's talking about, or maybe just the fact that sickness is the result of Satan's action. Not that someone sins and they're punished with sickness, but in the beginning in the Garden of Eden, there was no sickness. And where did sickness come from? It came from sin. And Satan is the one who we brought sin into the world. Adam and Eve brought sin into the world with Satan's tempting. But anytime someone is experiencing this, it's not God's fault, it's Satan's fault, because he's the one that opened the door for sickness and suffering. And so she has been bound by Satan for 18 years. What better day to release her? Is there a better day than the Sabbath? That's the best time for her to be released of this burden. And two things happen. His opponents are humiliated, and everybody else is really happy. Again, I don't know what the synagogue official hoped to accomplish, that he would be praised or brought up in the eyes of the people, but that didn't happen. He was humiliated, and the other opponents were humiliated, and everybody else is just happy. Because people can see hypocrisy. People know what hypocrites look like. And I'm sure that this is how this man acted frequently, that he was in charge and he was the boss and he was going to give the orders. And you people don't come do that today, come back some other day, and then we'll... And I'm sure that was his character. And the people were happy to see him put in his place. Jesus goes on to give some descriptions of the kingdom. Therefore he was saying, what is the kingdom of God like, and to what shall I compare it? It is like a mustard seed which a man took and threw into his own garden, and it grew and became a tree, and the birds of the air nested in its branches. And again he said, to what shall I compare the kingdom of God? It is like leaven which a woman took and hid in 3 pecks of meal, until it was all leavened. Jesus says, so what's the kingdom of God like? What is the church like? What can I compare it to? Here's a parable that's obviously designed to help us understand the kingdom, and it is like a mustard seed. Have you ever seen a mustard seed? They're little. They are really little. And he threw it into his garden. It became a tree. I planted some mustard seed one time, and it got to be a pretty big bush, pretty good sized bush. And so he says it's a little teeny tiny thing, but in the right conditions, look at how big it is. And so the kingdom is like a mustard seed that you put it in the garden, and it grows into a large bush or a large tree, and it provides some housing for the birds of the air. And you notice that in the version that I used, that birds of the air was in all caps, and that means it's a quotation from the Old Testament. 3 times in this chapter, Jesus just brings a statement out of the Old Testament and it applies to what he's saying. Doesn't give any background, doesn't give any details. He just pulls the words of that Old Testament passage and incorporates into what he's saying. There are a number of times where it talks in the Old Testament about birds of the air taking refuge. In Ezekiel 31:6, it talks about Assyria and applies it there. You remember in Daniel 4 where Nebuchadnezzar talks about how great he is, and he sees this vision where the tree is cut down. There was a great tree, and all the birds nested in it, but then it was cut down. But then in Ezekiel 17, there's a use of it that's probably closest to what Jesus is intending. He says, "Thus says the Lord, I shall also take a sprig from the lofty top of the cedar and set it out. I shall pluck from the topmost of its young twigs a tender one, and I shall plant it on a high and lofty mountain. On the high mountain of Israel I shall plant it, that it may bring forth boughs and bear fruit, and become a stately cedar. And birds of every kind will nest under it. They will nest in the shade of its branches. And all the trees of the field will know that I am the Lord. I bring down the high tree, exalt the low tree, dry up the green tree, and make the dry tree flourish. I am the Lord. I have spoken, and I will perform it." Jesus said the kingdom is like the mustard seed, and he uses that example. And God is able to take the smallest thing and make it into the greatest thing. And then it's like leaven, and you stick the leaven in some flour, what happens? All of a sudden it gets way bigger. It starts out as a little thing, but it grows and grows and grows. And so how's the kingdom like that? How's the kingdom like a mustard seed? And how's the kingdom like leaven? We don't have to do colossal things. We just do the little things that we're expected to do. And when we do the little things, then big things come of it. And it's because we're not the big ones doing it. We're doing the little things, and then God takes the little things and makes them into big things. And so if you're waiting to do something until it's a big grandstand thing, then don't bother. But tomorrow you're going to have an opportunity to do some little things. And if you do the little things, God will make them into the things that he wants, and he will be able to use them the way he wants them to do. And so God takes little things and makes them into big things. He points out that there are there's only one way really to get to heaven, and that's through a narrow door. He was passing through from one city and village to another, teaching, and proceeding on his way to Jerusalem. And someone said to him, "Lord, are there just a few who are being saved?" And he said to them, "Strive to enter by the narrow door, for many, I tell you, will seek to enter and will not be able. Once the head of the house gets up and shuts the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock on the door, saying, 'Lord, open up to us,' then he will answer and say to you, 'I do not know where you are from.' Then you will begin to say, 'We ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets.' And he will say, 'I tell you, I do not know where you are from. Depart from me, all you evildoers.' There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth there when you see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, but yourselves being cast out. And they will come from the east and west and from north and south and will recline at the table in the kingdom of God. And behold, some are last who will be first, and some are first who will be last." And someone comes up and says, "Are just a few being saved?" And this would have been a good time for Jesus to say, "Oh, no. Everybody's going to be saved. You have to be really, really bad to be lost, because most people are going to be saved," which is the prevalent thought in the world, I think, that most people are going to be okay. Most people are going to go to heaven. You'd have to be really, really evil to not go to heaven. This would have been the perfect place for Jesus to say, no, a whole bunch of people are being saved. But the answer here is the same one he gave in the Sermon on the Mount, that there is a wide way and a narrow way. There's a wide gate and a narrow gate. And again, there's no third way. There's the narrow one that leads to heaven, and the wide one that leads to destruction. And he says that we need to choose the narrow door. It is frustrating sometimes. We would like to see everybody in the world saved. We would like to see this building full and overflowing every time we get together. It'd be great if we saw that, but the reality is there aren't a whole lot of people who are interested in doing what God wants them to do. And so we're happy with the ones we have. We're happy with the ones who do want to follow God and do want to serve God and who are willing to enter by that narrow door. Once the door is closed, it's not going to come open again. It makes you think of that the parable of the virgins and their oil for their lamp, and 5 were ready and 5 weren't. And the ones who were ready went in while the door was still open, but the others went to try to get more oil, and when they came back, the door was locked, and there was no unlocking it. We need to be ready. You can knock on the door and say, Lord, open up to us, and here are those words, the words that you'd never, ever want to hear on Judgment Day is, I do not know where you are from. There are 2 options we'll hear on Judgment Day. Welcome, good and faithful, enter into the rest, or I do not know you. Those are the 2 options. We do not want to hear that first one. The second one, I don't know who you are. We want to hear the first one, enter in. But we ate and drank in your presence. We were kind of hanging around a little bit. You taught in our streets. And, I've mentioned before, in Italy we had a location that had a window that we set up as a display window, and we would put posters in there and different things. And I don't know how many people told us, we really liked what you had in the window. But they did nothing about it. And it's like, you were right there with us. Does that count? We ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets, and almost doesn't count on the Judgment Day. And Jesus says, I want to tell you, I do not know where you are from. Depart from me, all you evil doers. And that's perhaps a reference to Psalm 6:8. Depart from me, all you who do iniquity, for the Lord has heard the voice of the weeping. He said there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. People are going to come from all over, every direction. They're going to come and sit down at the table in the kingdom of God, and you're left out. Some who are last are going to be first, and some who are first are going to be last. At one point, Jesus uses this as a lesson of humility. If there's a banquet, you just don't go to the head place. You go to the least place, and then you can be moved up. And we just need to do our humble best to do what we're supposed to do. And we may look like we're the last, but we may end up being the first. Jesus uses this opportunity again to repeat what his goal is. His goal is to go to Jerusalem and to be crucified and raised on the 3rd day. Just at that time, some Pharisees came up, saying to him, Go away and depart from here, for Herod wants to kill you. And he said to them, Go and tell that fox, Behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the 3rd day I reach my goal. Nevertheless, I must journey on today and tomorrow and the next day, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish outside of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, just as the hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not have it. Behold, your house is left to you desolate, and I say to you, you shall not see me until the time comes when you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Some Pharisees come up to Jesus and say, Go away, Herod wants to kill you. You may remember in Nehemiah, some of his enemies came up to him and said, we need to get together. We need to hide and have this, because they're plotting against you. And Nehemiah said, I'm not going to fall for your trick. I'm not going to run and act like I'm afraid. And these Pharisees come up and they want to get Jesus to run away and hide. And you need to go away. Herod wants to kill you, so you need to go to a safe place. And Jesus said, you go tell that fox, I am going to reach my goal on the 3rd day. And there's nothing he can do about it. He cannot stop it. I am going to reach my goal. And the 3rd day, of course, is a reference to his resurrection. He died and he was buried and he was raised on the 3rd day. And that's when he reached his final goal, was in his resurrection. What's that? No. It wasn't Herod that killed him. In fact, Herod had to admit that he was innocent. If you look at the story of the trial of Jesus, Pilate 3 times pronounces Jesus innocent. Pilate announces Jesus innocent 3 times. He said he's not guilty, he's not guilty, he's not guilty. And it says that Pilate knew that Herod sent him back because Herod found no fault in him. And so Jesus was found innocent 4 times. Once by Herod, 3 times by Pilate. And so Herod wasn't going to get him. Herod had to admit that he wasn't guilty. It was interesting. I was reading the story of Paul and his trials, and Festus and Agrippa said, "This guy's not guilty. This guy's innocent." And if it wouldn't have been for the fact that he appealed to Caesar, he'd be let free. But how many of these people, when they actually faced the trial, it was proved that they were not guilty, and Jesus was not guilty, and Herod had to admit it. And then he makes this statement, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I wanted to gather you under my wings like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing." And then he said, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And that refers back perhaps to Psalm 118. A lot of good stuff in Psalm 118. We were familiar with Psalm 119 as the longest chapter in the Bible. And every verse of Psalm 119 is incredible because it focuses on the Word of God. But Psalm 118 is not bad either. And it says from verse 22, "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day which the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. O Lord, do save, we beseech thee. O Lord, we beseech thee, do send prosperity. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. We have blessed you from the house of the Lord." And so Jesus said, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." And he would be the first one who did that. And then we can follow along. If we follow in the name of the Lord and follow what he says, then we can receive those same blessings. Thank you very much. Jason's going to have to begin with the next chapter next time.